For the longest time, we've approached protecting nature like trying to preserve a perfect photograph, beautiful, unchanging, and kept safe behind glass. But what happens when the world itself is changing so fast that the photograph starts to warp and fade? Today, we're going to dive into a completely new rule book for conservation, one that's built for a planet that's always on the move.
Let's just put it bluntly. Our entire conservation playbook, the one we've used for decades, was written for a stable, predictable world. But that world, it doesn't exist anymore. And that means the old rules are shattering right along with it.
And that lands us right here, with the big question, the one we're really trying to unpack today. If the future is a constantly moving target, how in the world do we build conservation strategies that can actually keep up? Okay, so before we can build something new, we've really got to understand why the old foundation is crumbling. Let's dig into why those old ways just aren't cutting it anymore. And this right here, this is the absolute heart of the problem. For over a century, the entire field of conservation was built on this idea called stationarity. Basically, it's the belief that nature, yeah, it fluctuates, but it does it within a known, predictable range. Well, climate change has completely shattered that assumption. The past is no longer a reliable map for the future. And these changes, they create this massive domino effect. Warmer temperatures don't just happen in a vacuum. They cause species to move, natural cycles get all out of whack, and entire ecosystems can literally just break apart. This leads to what scientists are calling novel ecosystems. Think of shrubs suddenly taking over Arctic tundra that used to be just lichen and moss. So plan to save a specific forest, it becomes kind of useless if that whole forest is trying to move north. So if the old way is broken, what's plan B? Well, it's a whole new approach called adaptive management, and it's designed specifically to manage in the face of uncertainty.
Now, this isn't just, throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Adaptive management is a formal, structured process of learning by doing. You make a move, you monitor what happens, and you use that brand new knowledge to make your next move even smarter.
And this right here represents a huge philosophical shift. It's a total flip of the script. Instead of seeing uncertainty as this big, scary wall that stops us from doing anything, this approach embraces it. It basically says, our lack of perfect knowledge is the starting point for management, not the end point. So here's the difference in a nutshell. Traditional management is kind of like building a stone arch. It's rigid, it aims for stability, and it's built from a fixed blueprint. Adaptive management, that's more like being the captain of a sailboat. You're constantly adjusting to the wind and the currents, aiming for resilience so you can bend with the changes instead of breaking. Okay, so how does this actually work on the ground? Well, the engine that drives adaptive management is a continuous feedback loop. It's a cycle of learning as you go. It's a really simple but super powerful four-step process. First, you assess the situation and plan your action, but you treat that plan like a hypothesis, an educated guess. Second, you go out and you implement that action as an experiment. Third, and this part is absolutely critical, you monitor the results. What actually happened? And fourth, you evaluate that data and adjust your next plan based on what you learned. Then the cycle begins all over again, getting smarter each and every time. And this process really comes in two main flavors. You've got active management, which is like running multiple experiments at once to see which strategy works best. It lets you learn really fast, but it can be expensive. The more common passive approach is where you try your single best idea, monitor it very carefully, and then adjust as you learn more over time. This isn't just some abstract concept. There's a whole toolbox out there designed to help managers actually put adaptive management into practice. So let's take a look inside. Frameworks are basically the roadmaps for this whole process. For example, the Climate Smart Conservation Framework guides managers through a step-by-step cycle. It makes sure decisions are transparent and collaborative, and it even includes a step to reevaluate your fundamental goals because, hey, in a changing world, what we're trying to achieve might need to change too. That assess and plan step we talked about, it's powered by some really key analytical tools. Vulnerability assessments help identify what's most at risk. Species distribution models can project where wildlife might move in the future. And maybe most importantly, scenario planning lets us stop betting on a single prediction. Instead, we can test our strategies against multiple possible futures, like a hot and dry world versus a hot and wet one, to find robust options that work no matter what comes. But adopting this approach is about way more than just new tools and new frameworks. it requires a profound shift in the entire culture and philosophy of conservation.
For a long, long time, the goal was essentially to preserve a static snapshot, to freeze a particular ecosystem with its specific list of species in time.
But the new mindset, it shifts the focus to managing dynamic processes. It's less about which specific species happen to be there and more about making sure the underlying ecological and evolutionary processes, like water cycles, nutrient flows, and connectivity, are healthy and functional. Similarly, ecological restoration has traditionally aimed to return a degraded area to some historical pre-disturbance state. But now, that goal is shifting towards designing for the future. This means creating resilient systems that are adapted for the conditions that are coming, even if that system looks nothing like what was there in the past. It's a proactive, forward-looking way of thinking. This all leads us to a very difficult but very necessary concept: conservation triage. Just like in an emergency room, when you have limited resources and overwhelming threats, you have to make explicit, tough decisions. It might mean choosing not to spend millions protecting a small, isolated polar bear population at the southern edge of its range, and instead using those same resources to secure a much larger, more resilient habitat for them further north. And this is the ultimate question this new paradigm forces us to ask. It's uncomfortable, for sure. But in a world that's defined by change, facing these choices head-on may be the only way forward. What are we willing to let go of to save what we can?